in this world, so far as I know, and I have searched the records for years and employed agents to help me, has ever lost money by underestimating the intelligence of the great masses of the plain people. Nor has anyone ever lost public office thereby. The mistake that is made always runs the other way. Because the plain people are able to speak and understand, and even in many cases to read and write, it is assumed that they have ideas in their heads and an appetite for more. This assumption is a folly. H.L. Mencken, September 1926, often attributed to Barnum or even movie mogul Louis B. Mayer, or now to Trump. The shortened version of that, of course, is nobody ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the American public. I apologize to you. I should have seen this coming Sunday night when I tripped over that Times Siena poll from last month of Hispanic voters. Trump, who can now lay claim to being the Grover Cleveland of our time, runs on anti-immigrant nativism and hate, anti-Hispanic, anti-Latino, anti-Mexican, anti-Puerto Rican, anti-Latin American. Clearly has plans for internment camps. Clearly has plans for retroactively changing the status of citizenship, including of kids who were born here. People who today are fully and legally here will not be tomorrow. And asked by the pollsters from Siena, when you hear about this, do you think he's talking about you? About how bad immigrants are, how bad Mexicans are, how bad Hispanics are, how he's going to get them all removed, that they're poisoning the bloodstream? When asked by the pollsters, when you hear this, do you think he's talking about you? 2/3 of Latinos said, oh, no, which is short for, oh, no, he's not going to eat my face. For those under 30 in this demographic, the number was, 71%? Oh, no, he's not talking about me. He means other Latinos. Trump won Latino males by 11 points, and I have two words to say to them, and they are on behalf of the Trump administration, and the words are, bye now. He will deport people from the same place you or your folks are from. He will deport people who have the same names you do. He will deport your relatives and friends, and when he runs out, he will change the laws, and he will deport you and your parents and your children. Because he's nuts. Because he employs a lunatic named Stephen Miller, who violently, irrationally, foamingly hates Hispanic people. You know who I'm talking about, the guy with the face that looks like a tiny penis. He was turned down by a Hispanic girl for a date in high school, or a girl he liked went out with a Hispanic guy instead. I can't remember the details of the story. A fella I know who went to school with him told me once. It's one of those two things. This originates from all of that. So he hates Hispanics exactly the way Hitler hated Jews. And Trump, who hates them but less fervently, because hating them takes time away from talking about himself. He listens to Stephen Miller, and he hears more votes. And not only does he get elected president while his brains are draining out his ears like a runny yeast infection, but the very people he is going to torture and deport vote for him. Oh, no, he's not talking about me. No one in this world, so far as I know, and I have searched the records for years and employed agents to help me, has ever lost money by underestimating the intelligence of the great masses of the plain people. Or you can quote the George Carlin line. Ran into Bob Costas on Fifth Avenue Tuesday. Bob quotes our friend George. Remember what he said about the intelligence of the average American? Think how stupid the average American really is, and then remember that 50% are more stupid than that guy. Latino males plus 11 for Trump. It would be funny if it weren't true. So if you voted for him and you aren't a white guy, 2 words, bye now. I actually had one belly laugh since election night, and I have the ability to prove it. There's a guy, Tim Carney, fitting name, writes for the Washington Examiner, which is a fascist propagandist rag, which means its headline writers are more honest than the ones at the New York Times are. And this is what Tim Carney wrote before the election. Though I'm not voting for Trump, I might be rooting for him, though one never knows until one checks one's own heart as the results start coming in. But the top two reasons I'd be happy if he wins are, 1, then he won't try to overturn the result. 2, then he can't run again. Oh, the upbeat, positive approach. The dictator is half full, not half empty idea. Brilliant. Thank God we elected Trump so he won't try another coup and kill people. Yes, that's worth 4 years of hell. Or however long until Trump dies, which has to be soon. He's been acting like a melting statue and looking like one for months. And then, of course, we get President Vance. And during Trump's funeral, while they're standing there saluting dead Trump while they're playing the anthem or YMCA by the Village People, while they're doing that, while they're standing there, Putin simultaneously strikes Poland and Czechia. And while Vance literally pees his pants, that video will make George Bush on 9/11 look like Attila the Hun planning war games. Anyway, the second half of what this guy Carney wrote shows that the he won't eat my face mentality transcends political division. Conservatives can't get their heads out of their asses long enough to see the world clearly, even for like 32 seconds. Of course, soon-to-be dead Trump, if he doesn't stroke out or his heart doesn't attack him first, is running in 2028. I mean, it may be a stunt election because he might have eliminated the real ones by then. But that's the point. He can't leave office. Whatever happens to these charges against him, if he leaves office, they prosecute him. Did you see anybody in the mainstream press write this yesterday? Even now, they're still just rewriting the press releases. Oh, well, he's only going to serve the one term because he can't serve it. The conservative Carney, they're all Carneys, doesn't know all the other conservatives are getting their arguments ready that the 2-term limit will not apply to Trump because, well, let's make up some bullshit. How about the 22nd Amendment means 2 consecutive terms? That was a popular one they were floating around at the beginning of the year. It's 2 consecutive terms, and then you can't serve again. But you had 2 non-consecutive terms. You could follow the second one with a third term. I'm sure that's what they meant, right, Alito? And of course, the Supreme Court will rubber stamp that. That's what Alito is there for. That and the insurrectionist wife's collection of anti-American flags. Then he can't run again. Moron. I have to tap the sign one more time. Yale historian Tim Snyder. Trump is in the classic dictatorial position. He needs to die in bed, holding all executive power to stay out of prison. This means that he will do whatever he can to gain power, and once in power, will do all that he can to never let it go. This is a basic incentive structure which underlies everything else. It is entirely inconsistent with democracy, unquote. Oh, and about the charges against him, it's not enough that Trump now owns the Justice Department and will have the new Attorney General. I believe that's going to be Silk. Fire Jack Smith. Jack Smith is reportedly now trying to wind down his prosecution of Trump for, treason. I believe that there's actually a good legal reason for Jack Smith to do this himself rather than to stand there and say, don't tread on me, that if he can withdraw, wind down the prosecution, he may be able to preserve the charges for 4 years from now. I'm not sure about that. I haven't seen anything definitive about that anywhere, and I went looking. I am now, as Mencken is looking for the guy who went bankrupt, underestimating the intelligence of the plain folk. I'm now joining him in my endless quest for information that I cannot find. In any event, what Smith is or is not doing, what Trump will or will not do to Smith, is insufficient for Trump's henchman and his old Attorney General, Bill Barr. That's right, I had Bill Barr as my Attorney General, and then later Silk from Diamond and Silk. I wanted them both, but Diamond is dead. Bill Barr wants the charges against Trump formally dropped because whatever Trump has got on Barr, it still works. I mean, he issued a statement yesterday. Listen to this. It's like 8,000 words. The American people have rendered their verdict on President Trump and decisively chosen him to lead the country for the next 4 years. They chose him to lead us with full knowledge of the claims against him by prosecutors around the country. I think Attorney General Garland and the state prosecutors should respect the people's decision and dismiss the cases against President Trump now. The Department of Justice has for years been pursuing President Trump in cases asserting novel legal theories have already been gravely weakened by a series of court decisions. Those claims, like the state prosecutions, plainly brought for political purposes, blah, 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 blah. He has the goods on me, and they will tell everybody that I know what I did and the name of the youth organization to which they belonged if I don't continue to fellate Donald Trump whenever possible. Signed, Bill Barr. Because, yes, Bill, that's how we settle prosecutions in this country. Hold an election. You've been charged with attempted murder? Let's have America vote on it. Like it was Star Search from the 80s and 90s. I think Bill Barr, who is, by the way, one of our greatest criminals, should be investigated by the International Court of Justice and the International Whaling Commission. And one more story in the No Fs Are Given Any Further edition of Countdown, the first of many. This is one of the great examples of cowardice in American history. This is Jeff Bezos, who stood up to Trumpian blackmail 8 years ago at the cost of like $1 billion when they had him cheating on his wife. And they said, we won't print it, but you have to support Trump in the Washington Post. And he went, no, I'm giving the money to my wife instead. And then, with or without more blackmail, this year Jeff Bezos bent over in front of the fascists and said, take me, I'm yours, and killed an endorsement of Kamala Harris in the Washington Post. Not that it would have been decisive, not that it would have moved 20 votes. But the point was, just stand up. Put something once in your life ahead of effing money. Just once. Because if this is your plan, in that last moment of consciousness before you die, you calculate how much money you're worth. You've wasted your entire life. And if there is some force in the universe, if there is some intelligence in the universe, if there is some design or creation in the universe, and that's your last thought, I would assume you're going to hell, Jeff Bezos. Big congratulations, this son of a bitch writes yesterday, to our 45th and now 47th president on an extraordinary political comeback and decisive victory. No nation has bigger opportunities. Wishing real Donald Trump all success in leading and uniting the America we all love. Oh my God, what an asshole. What a weasel asshole. Wishing real Donald Trump all success and that he doesn't expose me or kill me or whatever he told me he'd do to me. Maybe Trump has something on Lauren Sanchez, like an RFK Jr. Olivia story or something. Who knows? Only, of course, given Lauren Sanchez, it would have taken Trump like an hour just to completely list all the things they would have had on Lauren Sanchez. It is noted that after Biden won in 2020, Bezos did not congratulate him, but in 2016, he did congratulate Trump. And yet we were all surprised when he sold out the Washington Post. Anyway, this is not a tough fix here. Burn Amazon down, metaphorically speaking, of course. I mean, if Bezos wants to, as suggested, donate the Washington Post to a charitable trust along with the money to run it for X number of years, cool, that mitigates. Otherwise, F Jeff Bezos, F Amazon. I'd say we would all be best served by looking down on him, but the little bastard is like 4'9" as it is. Big congratulations to our 45th and now 47th president on an extraordinary political comeback. Christ, what's next, you little shit? Your political comeback, soon to be dead Trump, is more impressive than Hitler's and Napoleon's combined. Congratulations on defeating democracy. Oh, and if you buy 40,000 Amazon brand prefab, no assembly required concentration camps, it's free shipping. Son of a bitch. Son of a bitch, Jeff Bezos. A note about this podcast, it will continue, but not right now. Going to take the weekend off. I do think the podcast has suffered from being a little conservative. It needs to be a little bit more pointed. It also needs to be not 5 days a week. I'm getting old here. And probably not daily. So let's say this. I'm still working on this. I'll bring you at least 2 of these a week, and definitely, let's plan on this, a new one every Monday morning. Does that make sense? I mean, you don't want to hear more about this any more than I want to talk about this endlessly. When something interesting happens, something you may not have heard, something that has struck some memory or perhaps some insight within me, I will bring it to you. Because bluntly, if the vice president had won, I was going to retire. Or at least semi-retire. I can't do that now, God damn it. I mean, I need a nap. What I will do today is come back with a second block with a little more philosophy on Trump climbing out of his crypt. My lifeboat theory. Also, I have an alternative plan here for what's ahead on January 20th, but I want to think it through a little bit more. So I'm going to hold off, and I'll present that to you on Monday with the caveat right now that there are so many different ways to prove that what I'm going to suggest will never happen. But I should put it on the record anyway. And maybe most importantly of all this, remember my story of little Kit, the new rescue puppy? Good news about little Kit, the new rescue puppy. That's next. This is Countdown. So I've mentioned many, many times that I'm old. I started professionally, full-time, in 1979. I mean, that's 6 decades worth of work. Not 6 decades, but in 6 decades. And so the world of business that I entered into in 1979 is significantly different, was significantly different than the one there is today. As bad as it is now, as unfair, as misogynistic, as imbalanced against women and members of minority groups as it is now, it was much worse then. My first job at UPI Audio, I believe the total number of full-time employees in the New York office, which was headquarters, was 20. There was one woman. She was not on the air. 6 or 7 newscasters, 3 sportscasters, and a business guy, and she was not on the air. The bureau chief in Washington was a woman. That was it. The next job I had when I went to work for Charlie Steiner at the RKO radio network when I was 22 years old, and this does apply to Trump. I'm not just spewing out random information here. The second job was much more egalitarian and forward-looking, and the head of the operation, the program director, was a woman named Jo Interante, who was fabulous. And there were a lot of women executives in the news, on the news, and great newscasters and young news women and old news women. I mean, it was really very well balanced. But at some point, somebody I knew got a promotion. A woman got a promotion into a department where there had not been a lot of women. And there were 2 or 3. I believe it was sales. And as soon as she was promoted to running the sales department, she fired all the other women. And I was surprised by this, and I knew her well enough to say to her, "What? Why?" She said, "Look, this is a tough business to be in if you're a woman. I certainly, of all the things I don't need, it's competition inside my own office." I was startled by this. It had never crossed my mind as I considered the inequalities between men and women in broadcasting and in other fields. Now we're talking 1981. It never dawned on me that a woman who succeeded and moved up the ladder would first turn their attention to getting rid of all the other women. I thought there was some sort of, I don't think that we used the term sisterhood at that point, but there it was. And the reason that I tell this story is not to criticize women and the vote and Trump, but just that it reminded me of when I first developed my theory of the lifeboat. And that this is about who voted for Trump and how Trump got back into power and why we will be paying for it. You and I will be paying for it for at least 4 years, and there are people out there who will be paying for it, for 95 years, if there are 95 years left on this planet. Because that's another thing we haven't talked about yet. This is the last chance to avoid total climate catastrophe, and the guy in charge thinks that windmills cause cancer in birds or something, or wants to nuke tornadoes because he saw it on TV once. Anyway, so this is my theory of how he gets support from people who he intends to punish and has now a track record of punishing and torturing and destroying. How he gets the suckers to line up and pay him for the privilege of being beaten up by him. How does he do this? And it's this woman from the RKO radio network in 1981 who fired all the other women. The lifeboat theory. And here it is. All of humanity divides into two groups. You are on the Titanic. It sinks with astonishing speed, with astonishing loss of life, with astonishing rapidity. People who are expert on the disaster that befell Titanic point out that the movie itself is like 5 times as long as the actual hit the iceberg, everybody in the water, or at least realize that the ship is sinking, everybody in the water, ship's underwater. That in real time, just that part of the Titanic disaster would be about 20, 25 minutes. So you're in the water, and up from the freezing North Atlantic, you pop your head above water, and you're shocked that you're not drowned. And next to you is an empty, fully stocked lifeboat with 16 seats and provisions. And all of humanity, everybody who has ever lived, falls into one of two categories. Number one, you get into the lifeboat, you take the towel that is provided there and dry yourself off, and you begin to calculate quickly how many people you can bring in there with you. There's 16 sets of provisions. Well, what if we had, how many women do, with 14 women, do we need a couple of men, even though it should be all women, a couple of men because we're going to need to row? What about kids? If children, smaller amounts, maybe we could have 22 children and leave the adults in the water, just a couple of adults to pull the oars with me. There are oars here. And you're doing all these calculations while you are reaching out and pulling people into the lifeboat with you. That's one kind of person. Half of humanity, one would hope, maybe more. Actually, one would hope it would be 100% of humanity would fit into that category in our hypothetical lifeboat. The second type, the Trump voter, bobs into this same situation. Underwater, comes to the surface, there's the lifeboat, hops in, takes 2 towels out, cleans them, cleans himself with the towels, dries himself with the towels, drapes the towels around him. Now looks at all the provisions, calculates how many days they will last, and grabs the oars. And as people try to join him in the lifeboat, says, good, they left me these oars. Let me make sure I kill everybody trying to get into the lifeboat with me. That's also, I think, the defining feature between, quote, liberal, unquote, and, quote, conservative, unquote. Do you have any actual empathy? Have you ever, once in your life, done something for somebody else at some loss to yourself? Outside of, I think most conservatives love their children. I could point to a lot who clearly don't, like Trump. But, I mean, outside of that, would you do something for a stranger that might, in the lifeboat situation, make you hungrier a couple of days while you're on that lifeboat? That's what happened. And the number of category number 2 in our lifeboat analogy, the number of those in this country, those are the ones who say, oh, he's not talking about me. He's talking about those guys. Take them. I know this is not brilliant philosophical insight. If you'd like to see it more startlingly, clearly presented in a political context, read the plot of 1984, let alone all of the catchphrases and the Ministry of Truth and everything else, all the things, the iconography of the novel 1984. Read the plot of it, which is, don't do it to me, do it to them. That's how this guy is back. Because we have crossed that point in human history again. I'm sure we have been there many times before, but we certainly are now here in this country where the majority of people would take the oars and try to kill the other people trying to get on the lifeboat. On that happy note, let me present you with something happy. I told you that I had gotten a puppy with a bad heart as a rescue, and his name is Kit. And the whole story about how he succeeds my 17-year-old Minet, and Minet's name in French, colloquial for kitty. And suddenly they call up and they say, hey, we've got a cat or a dog named Kit. And I said, well, I think I'm supposed to take him then, Kitty and Kit. Then there was some indication for a while that the surgery that Kit's going to have on his heart was really risky and really dangerous, and his odds of surviving it are not good. It turns out there's a risk. There's always a risk. You're working on a heart surgery on a 3-pound soul. It's not a guarantee, but I ran into the surgeon and he told me 2 things. One was, yeah, it's like 9.5 out of 10 survivors, and they get complete recovery for this. So we're hopeful, and the surgery will be in a week and a half. And if spunk matters, if vitality matters, he's got this nailed, because he is, he may be less than 3 pounds, but he acts like he's about 1,800 pounds. But the reason for telling the story is not just that that's good news, and many people were very concerned about Kit when I talked about him. He has no other symptoms, but the surgeon who looked at him, I said, he's so small and you're going to operate on him. And somehow it's striking to me. I've had another dog. My other guy, Ted, had heart surgery when he was 10 months old. But Ted was, I don't know, 3 times as big as Kit. And it really struck me. It's like, he's really small. And the surgeon said, absolutely true. He's very small, but I'd like to remind you, we do this surgery on kittens. And if Kit were a kitten, he'd be a big kitten. Fingers crossed. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Follow me for the podcast promo videos on Blue Sky, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter X, Instagram, Threads, and Skyface. No longer on TikTok. I got banned for life from TikTok for sharing a satirical anti-Trump meme because TikTok sucks. Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, the musical directors of Countdown, arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Mr. Ray was on the guitars, bass, and drums. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. Everything else was pretty much my fault. That's Countdown for today. Just 1,536 days until the scheduled end of the term of lame duck President-elect Trump. The next scheduled countdown is Monday. As always, bulletins as the news warrants. Till next time, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.